August 2010. Bamiyan Valley, Afghanistan. 8 New Zealand soldiers fall wounded in just 12 minutes of combat. What happened in those minutes forced New Zealand to rethink its entire presence in the war. Bamiyan Valley, Central Afghanistan Province, August 2010. New Zealand's Provincial Reconstruction Team had been operating in the region since 2003, focusing on reconstruction and stabilization. Unlike the intense combat areas in the south, Bamiyan was considered relatively safe. Patrols followed established protocols, with cautious rules of engagement to minimize confrontations. The mission had become routine, almost predictable. But no one expected what would come next. The New Zealand force in Bamiyan consisted primarily of soldiers from the New Zealand Defence Force, supported by engineering and reconstruction units. The mission was dual: support the local Afghan government and carry out development projects. According to military documentation, the area had a history of low insurgent activity compared to the rest of the country. Patrols were routine, part of the constant presence needed to maintain stability. Records show that coordinated ambushes were rare in that specific region. The relative calm had created a sense of security that would prove dangerously misleading. Why Taliban forces chose that moment and location remains subject to military analysis. If you're interested in real military history and want to see more stories like this, consider subscribing to stay updated on future videos. During a routine patrol, the New Zealand unit was hit by fire from multiple positions simultaneously. Official documents confirm the ambush was planned with precision uncommon for that area. The insurgents had studied movement patterns and chosen terrain that limited cover options. In 12 minutes, 8 soldiers were wounded. For a small force operating far from immediate reinforcements, the casualty proportion was devastating. The speed of the attack left no time for the careful, measured response that peacetime training had emphasized. How was an experienced patrol caught so completely off guard? What failures in intelligence, preparation, and tactical awareness allowed such a devastating ambush to succeed? The patrol departed base following standard procedures documented in NZDF operational guidelines. According to military records, the unit consisted of approximately 30 soldiers moving through terrain they had patrolled multiple times before. Intelligence assessments for that day indicated normal threat levels, categorizing the mission as routine. The route had been used previously without incident, creating a pattern insurgents could exploit. This repetition, while providing local security presence, made movements predictable to anyone watching carefully. Preparation followed peacetime-influenced protocols designed for a reconstruction mission rather than combat operations. Equipment reflected the mission's original nature and the assumptions that came with it. New Zealand forces in Bamiyan carried standard small arms and body armor, but lacked some of the heavier weapons and armored vehicles common in southern Afghanistan where combat was expected. Communication systems were adequate for coordinating with base, but had limitations in mountainous terrain, where radio signals could be blocked by geography. Medical supplies were standard for patrol operations, sufficient for minor injuries but tested by multiple serious casualties. The force operated under rules of engagement that prioritized avoiding civilian casualties, restricting when soldiers could return fire. This caution, while ethically grounded and politically necessary, created tactical vulnerabilities that insurgents understood and exploited. Training emphasized reconstruction support and community engagement more than sustained combat scenarios. While NZDF soldiers maintained combat readiness and completed standard weapons qualifications, the Bamiyan mission had not experienced the intensity that hardened units in Helmand or Kandahar. Most soldiers had limited recent experience with coordinated ambushes or sustained firefights. The psychological preparation was for a stabilization mission, not counterinsurgency warfare. Documentation suggests this mismatch between expected and actual threat levels contributed significantly to the outcome. Soldiers trained for one type of mission found themselves in an entirely different scenario. The disconnect between mission type and reality extended to leadership assumptions. Officers planning operations based their assessments on historical data, showing Bamiyan as low threat, This created a feedback loop where safe patrols reinforced assumptions of safety, which led to procedures that prioritized efficiency over security. Vehicle spacing, movement speeds, and observation protocols all reflected a peacetime mindset. When the ambush came, it shattered not just the immediate tactical situation, but the entire operational framework the unit had been working within. The ambush began approximately midday as the patrol moved through a valley approach between two ridgelines. Reports confirmed that insurgents opened fire from elevated positions on multiple sides simultaneously, creating a classic L-shaped ambush formation. The initial volley came from at least 3 separate firing positions, creating overlapping fields of fire that limited movement options. Soldiers immediately sought cover, but the terrain offered few good positions. The insurgents had chosen their ground carefully, forcing the New Zealand unit into a kill zone with restricted escape routes. The tactical sophistication suggested experienced fighters, possibly including foreign combatants or Afghan veterans of previous conflicts. Within the first 2 minutes, multiple soldiers were hit by accurate rifle and machine gun fire. Combat reports indicate the insurgent fire was disciplined and accurate, suggesting trained fighters rather than opportunistic attackers. The New Zealand unit attempted to return fire and establish a defensive perimeter, but the rules of engagement created hesitation in some situations where targets weren't clearly identified as hostile. Radio communications with base reported the contact and requested support, but the remote location meant air support would take time to arrive. The unit had to hold position and treat casualties while under sustained fire from multiple directions. The patrol commander made immediate decisions that likely prevented fatalities. Documentation shows orders were given to consolidate positions, establish overlapping fields of fire, and prioritize casualty treatment. Soldiers with medical training moved between covered positions to reach wounded comrades, often exposing themselves to enemy fire. The discipline maintained under stress reflected the quality of NZDF training, even if the specific scenario hadn't been adequately prepared for. Communications remained functional throughout, allowing coordination both within the unit and with base support elements. Medical personnel worked to stabilize the wounded while other soldiers provided covering fire. The action lasted approximately 12 minutes of intense engagement before insurgent forces withdrew. Military documentation indicates this withdrawal was tactical, not forced. The attackers disengaged before air support could arrive, and while they still controlled the tactical situation. This showed remarkable fire discipline and command control on the insurgent side. By the time the shooting stopped, 8 New Zealand soldiers had been wounded, though none fatally. The patrol successfully evacuated all casualties back to base, maintaining unit cohesion despite the shock and casualties. The professionalism under fire would later be commended, but questions remained about how the situation developed in the first place. The immediate aftermath was chaotic but organized. Soldiers established security while casualties received treatment. Helicopter evacuation was coordinated for the most seriously wounded. The patrol extracted from the ambush site in good order, maintaining defensive posture in case of follow-up attacks. The insurgents had vanished into the terrain, using local knowledge and prepared escape routes. Initial reports went up the chain of command, triggering reviews at multiple levels of NZDF and coalition leadership. The wounded received immediate medical attention at the Bamiyan base before being evacuated for further treatment at more capable facilities. Official reports confirmed all 8 soldiers survived, though some required extended recovery periods and multiple surgeries. Injuries ranged from gunshot wounds requiring immediate surgical intervention to shrapnel injuries and blast effects. The physical toll was matched by psychological impact on the unit. For many soldiers, this was their first sustained combat experience, and the intensity shocked even combat veterans who had served in other theaters. The speed and coordination of the ambush shattered assumptions about Bamiyan's relative safety. Soldiers who had viewed their deployment as primarily a reconstruction mission suddenly confronted combat realities. The psychological shift from peacekeeping to warfare happened in minutes, leaving lasting effects. Some soldiers struggled with the suddenness of the transition, questioning their preparation and training. Unit cohesion remained strong, but the incident marked a clear divide between before and after in how the force approached operations. The incident triggered immediate tactical changes across all NZDF operations in Afghanistan. Patrol sizes increased significantly, sometimes doubling previous numbers to provide better fire support and security. Routes became less predictable, with deliberate variations introduced even when it complicated mission efficiency. Equipment requests went up the chain of command for better protective gear, weapons with greater range and firepower, and improved communication systems. Rules of engagement were reviewed at the highest levels to give soldiers more flexibility to respond to threats without waiting for confirmation through bureaucratic channels. Intelligence gathering intensified dramatically to understand how insurgents had planned such a coordinated attack in an area previously considered stable. Analysts reviewed months of reports looking for missed indicators. Interrogation of captured insurgents in other areas sought information about networks operating in Bamiyan. The 12-minute firefight had revealed that nowhere in Afghanistan was truly safe, a lesson learned at the cost of 8 wounded soldiers. Coalition partners shared the incident analysis, as it had implications for all reconstruction teams operating in supposedly secure areas. At the strategic level, the ambush forced New Zealand's government and military leadership to reassess the entire Afghan mission. Parliamentary inquiries examined whether soldiers had adequate support and equipment for the actual threats they faced versus the threats assumed in planning. Public debate intensified about New Zealand's role in Afghanistan and whether reconstruction teams were prepared for the evolving insurgent threat. Defense officials conducted formal reviews of operational procedures, force protection measures, and the fundamental mission concept. The incident became a turning point in how New Zealand approached its Afghan deployment, with implications extending beyond Bamiyan to all overseas operations. Political pressure mounted as opposition parties questioned government assurances about mission safety. The Prime Minister faced difficult questions about intelligence failures and equipment gaps. Defense spending debates suddenly focused on whether budget limitations had compromised soldier safety. The wounded soldiers' recovery became a national focus, with media following their progress and highlighting the human cost of the deployment. Some wounded soldiers returned to duty after rehabilitation, determined to complete their service and support their comrades. Others faced career-ending injuries that required transition to civilian life, a process complicated by physical limitations and psychological trauma. Their experience highlighted gaps in veteran support systems that prompted policy changes. The New Zealand public, which had largely supported the reconstruction mission as separate from combat operations, confronted the reality that their soldiers faced lethal threats. Media coverage shifted from development projects and community engagement to force protection concerns and combat readiness. Investigation revealed that insurgent activity in Bamiyan had been gradually increasing for months, but intelligence systems hadn't adequately flagged the evolving threat or communicated it to tactical units. The attackers likely included experienced fighters who had studied coalition patrol patterns over weeks or months, documenting movements and identifying vulnerable points. Their withdrawal before air support arrived showed tactical sophistication and discipline rare among insurgent forces. This suggested a more organized and capable insurgent presence than previously assessed, possibly indicating coordination with Taliban elements from other provinces. The ambush wasn't random violence or opportunistic attack. It was a calculated military operation designed to inflict maximum casualties and undermine coalition confidence in the region's stability. The psychological impact was as important as the tactical outcome. By proving they could strike successfully in supposedly safe areas, insurgents aimed to force coalition forces into defensive postures that would limit reconstruction work and community engagement. The strategy worked, as force protection necessarily became the dominant concern. The August 2010 ambush fundamentally changed New Zealand's approach to Afghanistan operations at every level. Force protection became the top priority, even when it complicated reconstruction work and limited community interaction. Patrol tactics adopted lessons from units operating in more hostile provinces, including vehicle spacing, observation procedures, and immediate action drills for ambush scenarios. Equipment upgrades accelerated, including better armored vehicles that could withstand small arms fire, improved communication systems with redundant backups, and enhanced medical capabilities for treating combat casualties in the field. Rules of engagement were revised to give soldiers clearer authority to defend themselves without waiting for confirmation of hostile intent in ambush situations. The legal and ethical framework remained, but tactical flexibility increased to reflect combat realities. This change was controversial, with concerns about civilian casualties balanced against soldier protection. The revision process involved legal advisors, operational commanders, and political leadership, ultimately producing guidelines that attempted to balance competing concerns. Training programs back in New Zealand incorporated the Bamiyan incident as a detailed case study. New deployments received more intensive combat preparation, including ambush response drills and stress inoculation training, even for reconstruction missions. The assumption that some areas of Afghanistan were safe zones was completely abandoned. Every patrol operated as if contact was imminent, with procedures and mindsets adjusted accordingly. This shift improved survivability, but made community engagement more difficult, as local populations responded to the increased security posture. The balance between security and mission effectiveness became a constant challenge for commanders. Heavy security made development work harder, as communities perceived coalition forces as occupiers rather than partners. But relaxed security risked another ambush. Finding the right balance required constant adjustment based on intelligence, local conditions, and mission requirements. The Bamiyan ambush cast a long shadow over these decisions, with commanders deeply aware of the consequences of miscalculation. The incident influenced New Zealand's timeline for withdrawal from Afghanistan significantly. While not the sole factor, the ambush contributed to growing domestic pressure to reassess the mission's costs and benefits. Parliamentary debates cited the wounded soldiers when questioning whether New Zealand should maintain its presence, given the evolving threat environment. Public opinion shifted as the reconstruction mission appeared increasingly indistinguishable from combat operations. By 2013, New Zealand began drawing down forces, reducing its commitment while maintaining limited presence. The complete withdrawal came in 2021 as part of broader coalition exit, but the process had begun years earlier. Recognition came for the soldiers involved, though it couldn't erase the trauma or answer all questions. Several received awards for their actions under fire, particularly those who treated casualties while exposed to enemy fire. The unit's discipline in maintaining defensive positions and evacuating all wounded was noted in official commendations. The patrol commander received recognition for leadership under extreme stress. However, awards couldn't erase questions about whether better preparation, intelligence, or equipment could have prevented or mitigated the casualties. The incident became both a story of courage under fire and a cautionary tale about mission planning, intelligence analysis, and the gap between assumed and actual threats. Military academies studied it as an example of how peacetime assumptions can persist dangerously in combat zones. The wounded soldiers' experiences contributed to improved training and support systems, their sacrifice leading to changes that protected future deployments. But for those involved, the 12 minutes in Bamiyan remained a defining moment that separated their lives into before and after. But this wasn't the only time New Zealand forces faced unexpected intensity in Afghanistan. In 2012, another incident would test the lessons learned from Bamiyan when NZDF personnel came under attack in Kabul itself, proving that threat evolution continued to outpace adaptation. That operation would reveal whether the changes prompted by August 2010 had truly prepared New Zealand soldiers for Afghanistan's unpredictable dangers, or whether new vulnerabilities had emerged as old ones were addressed. If you want to learn more about real modern military operations and the lessons learned from combat, subscribe to the channel. Comments: which historical operation do you want to see detailed?